USAA knows dynamic duos can save the day, like superheroes and sidekicks or auto and home insurance. With USAA, you can bundle your auto and home and save up to 10%. Learn more and get a quote at usaa.com/bundle. Restrictions apply.
Hilton brings you new ways to stay, with experiences that let you capture the glory days. Introducing the Graduate Hotels. Each inspired by local college towns, these stays are always original and never boring. Get in touch with traditions all across the country and enjoy a stay that's a class above the rest. Book at Graduate Hotels with Hilton Honors Points at Hilton.com. It's a win-win. Hilton, for the stay.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Underrated Movie Podcast. This is a podcast where we discuss films that are underrated, underappreciated, and ones that have gone under the radar and passed most people by. I am your host, Derek McDuff, and today I'm going to be talking about Disney's Hercules with the host of the Film Nuts Podcast, Taylor D. Adams. How's it going, Taylor?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. I'm excited to have you on. Before we get into this mythological Disney Renaissance film, what did you want to let the people know about yourself and your podcast?
Sure. So, hi, I'm Taylor. I'm a filmmaker and storyteller by trade. And when the pandemic hit, I lost touch with a lot of people that I like to talk about movies and TV with. So I started the Film Nuts podcast, which became a platform for me to just talk to people about what they love and why they love watching what they love. And hopefully through the conversations I have with my guests, I get to know my guests better, as well as the listeners get to know the guests better as well as appreciating whatever they happen to love watching.
Yeah, it's great. I was listening to some episodes, and since we got in touch, and I was really loving it. It's very conversational. It feels like a conversation that you and your film friends would have after you walk out of a movie theater, and you're just like, wow, that was a good movie. Let's talk about it. Just those kind of pure great movie conversations. So I was really, really enjoying it.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to mimic too. Anyway, that's the best. That's one of the best parts of like watching stuff. Is talking about them with people. Like, I don't really want to watch a movie or a TV show and then just sit with my own thoughts. Like, I want to exchange it with other people and talk things out.
Exactly. It's I think that's a big part of the reason I became a podcaster too. Is it's good to talk about movies with people and to share your thoughts and bounce ideas off each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but to speaking of movies and our thoughts about it, the one, like I said, we're talking about today is the 97 version of Hercules. Obviously, there's been a few versions of Hercules over the years. A lot of movies just called Hercules, but yes, this is the Disney version by the legendary directing duo of John Musker and Ron Clements, who did a lot of those great Disney Renaissance movies, like The Little Mermaid and all these great ones. Speaking of legendary Disney people, Alan Menken did the music for this film, and it also has a great cast of Tate Donovan, Danny DeVito, Susan Egan, and James Woods. But this is a loosely, very, very loosely based on the Greek myths of Hercules, or Heracles, as he's actually known in Greek. Hercules is his Roman name, but we all know him as Hercules, and the kind of surrounding myths. But this is a movie that, when we started talking about doing a collaboration and having you on, this is one of the ones you pitched. Why was this one that you felt was an underrated movie?
Look, whenever I talk to folks about their favorite Disney movie, whether in person or virtually or whatever, not a lot of people bring this movie up, and I feel like it needs to be brought up. Like everybody, they talk about Mulan, talk about The Lion King, which are all great. But I feel like not a lot of love is shown for Hercules. I feel like people forget it sometimes. And I feel like it needs to be discussed within the pantheon of the other Disney Renaissance films as well. Like, the music is great. The art style is actually pretty unique for what it is. And then this also kind of marked Disney Renaissance animation transition into incorporating like more like computer animated 3D elements, which I think is really neat. So I think it needs a little more praise than the crickets I'm hearing whenever it comes up in conversation.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I've just done a lot of 90s Disney stuff recently. This is the first Disney proper film I've covered from that decade. I also, talked about a live action Disney film and a Pixar film, Bugs Life. And like, same thing with Bugs Life as this one is like, yeah, this is a movie like people like, and is pretty beloved. Like you ask somebody, do you like Hercules? People will be like, yeah, but it's not going to be like, hey, what's your favorite Disney movie? Hercules. Like you said, that's not usually the go-to one. And even at the time, this movie relatively underperformed at the box office. Like it wasn't a flop by any means, but it didn't meet their expectations. It didn't perform as well as a lot of those other Disney Renaissance movies. And in a lot of ways, it's not as well remembered as a lot of those Disney films. You brought up Mulan and The Lion King, even Pocahontas, I think is kind of remembered better, although I don't think that one's aged nearly as well. And the other thing you mentioned that I really want to hit on is the art style of this movie, which I am a very big fan of. I love that a lot of Disney films, especially in the Renaissance, but also going back earlier to that, would kind of mimic whatever art style of the story and the culture they were telling. Like if you look at Mulan, it's very like Japanese, like, painting inspired, right? If you look at Cinderella, it's like almost like medieval scriptures. And if you look at, or not Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty. But if you look at this, it looks like the pottery, the art, the clay that you would see in ancient Greece. But it also modernizes it a lot. It feels like 90s in a good way. It's got a lot of like 90s references. I think they were trying a little bit to do with Hades what they did with the genie, to not necessarily as much success as that, but it still works. And then also bringing in all the gospel music. There's a lot of like gospel and like R&B and stuff like that you would not see in a Disney movie. You have this cast of the Greek choir, which is something so essential to Greek mythology, and it's like a cast of like black gospel singers, and I think that's so cool, and I think that's something at the time wasn't appreciated, because in reading about this movie, it kind of had a mixed reception as far as the songs went, which I was very surprised by, because I think this is probably in my top 2 or 3 just musically Disney films.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up the gospel choir, because that's like the first thing that I think of when I think of this movie is someone thought to make the Greek chorus a narrative mechanism that has been around since the term drama and the terms drama and comedy were invented. Like someone took that idea and made it into a gospel choir, because the movie is about gods, and I think that is absolutely perfect. Like it fits so well. It has not only I think that's clever, but I think the music has a different energy, like you were saying, than some of the previous Disney Renaissance films, where a lot of times we're leaning into more of like symphony adjacent / stage musical kind of sounding songs. And this, we've got some bangers. Like we've got a lot of different voices, which is really cool within it, because it is a Greek chorus. Like we're hearing multiple women sing at the same time. And even if they don't lean heavily into gospel music, there's still like a Motown inspired track in there. And then you have like your classic, like Going the Distance is like kind of your classic, like this is arranged like every other Disney song, and it's still really good.
It's good. It's the one that gets nominated for the Academy Award. That's the showy one, Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I just think that's such a clever way to interpret a Greek chorus. Was okay, this is a Disney musical. We got to incorporate a musical. What if we made it a gospel choir? And I think that's so great.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that it works with, because in the same way that the music is, I don't know if stuffy is the right word, but that kind of vibe of other Disney Renaissance movies where they're more Broadway, at least, like more showy, more like this is the everything. A lot of them are closer to Go the Distance in a lot of those other Disney. I think that really is the whole vibe of the whole movie, where it's a lot more playful. It's a lot more I won't say full Looney Tunes, but there's a lot more stuff like that, where like
Mhm.
I was watching it this time and there's a scene where like Hercules shakes someone, I think it's Phil's hand, and his fingers are like all crumped up and crumpling. It's like, you're not going to see
Mhm.
that in Beauty and the Beast. That's a lot more classical American cartoon physics, but it works with these larger than life Greek heroes, these big myths. And that's something I really appreciate as somebody who I'm a big nerd for like Greek mythology, I or just mythology in general. And I think
Mhm.
that's something that over the years has become more and more popular. I definitely remember at the time as a kid, I also loved the Hercules and Xena shows that were running, kind of
Mhm.
contemporary to this, especially Xena. There's all that stuff, and then the generation after me, of course, like has Percy Jackson, and there's been there was even two Hercules movies that came out in the same year, 10 or so years ago with The Rock and whoever. But like it's just something that's always here in our culture because I think the Greek myths are like so central to our kind of like modern, at least Western storytelling, and they're so malleable, and you can do so much with them. And there's a lot of this that is like, okay, like this is very like if you ask, somebody who studies Greek mythology how accurate is this, they're gonna be like not very accurate, but
Zero.
also
It's
yeah,
close to
exactly,
zero.
yes, but also like the Greek myths are myths that are like there's a million even within like Greek times, which these myths even before they were ancient spanned hundreds of years and had all these different interpretations. And Zeus did something in this story, and he did something completely different in this story, and someone has a different mom in this story, and so I appreciate that it's like kind of going with that tradition, and it's still respecting the roots of it. It's still like if you know mythology, there's like little moments that you're like, that's really good. Like there's a point when Hercules like bumps his head on like a log, and he's like, oh yeah, that was from the Argo, and you're like, oh well, that's how Jason died. Like his head, like a log from the Argo, killed him. So there's lots of little stuff like that I really dug. I don't did you vibe with any of that stuff?
Yeah, first of all, I just think that I was noting this maybe a couple years ago. I rewatched this for the first time, maybe since I was a kid, and I didn't really remember. I generally remember the characters. I remember generally what happens, but the specifics were kind of cloudy. So when I did watch it, I was like, "Oh yeah, there's no way Disney could do an accurate Greek mythology movie.
Mhm.
A, because like you said, there's so many interpretations, and B, there's just like a lot of stuff that isn't family friendly
Right.
when it comes
Yes.
to like
Yes.
when it comes to like a Greek, an animated kids movie about Greek mythology. Like Hercules' mother has to be Hera. She
Right.
can't be a mortal woman that Zeus had an affair with. Like that,
Mhm. Yeah.
that just doesn't function
Right. Zeus is
within
not
the,
fucking a swan in this version.
yes, exactly. Like, nope, sorry, we can't really do that. But yeah, I love those little just like mythological gags that are in
Mhm.
there. Like we can't do a full story, but let's throw in like some referential humor for the adults out there outside of pop culture things. So like at the end, like Dionysus is like popping a bottle of champagne or something,
Mhm.
and then one of my favorite bits is Narcissus.
Yes,
He's wearing
I thought
he's
that's where
wearing
you're going.
he's wearing a medallion that says "me" on it, and I never noticed that until I
Oh, yeah,
watched
I
it. I
didn't
was like,
notice that
"That's so
either.
clever." Yeah,
That's
it's
really
like
funny.
it's so funny. Just those little references I think are really cool. Because it pays homage, I guess, to these old stories in a fun way. Like I can imagine either writing the script or like when it's being animated, like what if we just had this gag in the background
Mhm.
that like played around with some of the mythology that we have been taught. I think it's really fun.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite ones is because it pays both homage to the kind of because there's a lot of stuff about like the 12 trials of Hercules kind of gets put in this
Hmm.
and rearranged, but there's the one where he's like posing, and there's the one of the famous Hercules is the I might be mispronouncing this, the Nemean lion that he
Yeah.
kills, and the lion is Scar, like the
Scar.
lion side is
Yes.
Scar, and you're like, that's so good on so many levels. Like you're like, as a Disney nerd, you're like, yes, that works. But then as a mythology nerd, you're like, beautiful. So it's really smart. It's really well written, both in terms of like the dialogue and the songs, which I want to circle back to the songs a little bit because this is something like I haven't watched this. I think I've watched it since I was a kid, one time, and because I remember in high school just hanging out with a bunch of friends, and we're like, let's put on Hercules, and it was one, and I had the same experience. I was like, I love Hercules, and it's funny because you talk about this. I was like, yeah, this is a great movie. I watched it all the time as a kid. I since the 90s, I watched it once in high school, which is 15 years ago now, and then I watched it again, and I was like, this is a movie I love, remember vividly, and I just never put it on. So it speaks to you about like this being underrated, but yeah, I've listened to the songs so many times. Like this,
They're so good.
This has
They're so good.
bangers.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite song or a few favorite songs from this?
Well, my favorite is Zero to Hero. I think that's just like, it's the embodiment of like everything that's going on. That's really clicking for me within the movie itself. Like it's a gospel track. It's got a ton of energy. It is a part of a training montage, which I love a training montage because there's so many cool things you can do with it. And it shows a lot of the energy, a lot of the playfulness that you were talking about, and kind of it sets up our character before his fall. And I think it's an important narrative point in the movie for that song to kind of come into place.
Yeah, I think so. I think I really agree. One of my favorites definitely is, and this is a song I will listen to constantly, is Won't Say I'm in Love, Meg's kind of song. Because I think that does a lot of the things you're talking about, from a character building perspective with Meg, who I think is one of the most fleshed out kind of love interests. Usually it's like interesting because it's usually flipped where, it's a, female protagonist, usually like a princess or something. And then you have like the male, is the kind of like shallowly written love interest. But Meg is like really well written, and her backstory about her just kind of how she's jaded because she sold her soul to save her ex-boyfriend, who then like ran off with somebody. And so she's like, in this really awkward position. So she sings just the song about how she doesn't want to fall in love, but then she is. And it's also just like a really great song that I can listen to over and over. And it feels like kind of the perfect combination of what we were talking about, of like, this is kind of a classic, like, Disney song, but also feeling upbeat and, more modern in a lot of ways. And so that's one that I will never get tired of listening to,
Yeah, that's such a great one. I mean, there are no skips. There are no skips on this one. I think one of the really cool things about that song is that the Greek chorus, our gospel choir, shifts its tone a little bit, shifts its energy, and is now kind of embodying a little bit more of a Motown vibe. Like, I was having a discussion earlier today with some friends, and they brought up the musical numbers in Little Shop of Horrors and how they're kind of like a little bit of throwbacks, like Motown, like that Motown era. And that's what it reminded me of, is like, you've got a singular character singing their feelings, being blunt about everything. And then you've got this backup who is telling more of the story. And also it's being kind of a call and response to the main singer, which I think is so cool. And to touch on Meg's character as well, like, I think it's so fascinating because, like, watching it this time, I realized that, Hercules' journey is him trying to find his place by becoming what a true hero is, but he doesn't really know what a true hero is. And so he's trying to do these things. And the interesting thing to me is that Meg was actually already a hero. Like, this is like after she had done a heroic act. Like, she sold her soul to save somebody else. She sacrificed herself to save someone she loved, which is what Hercules will soon come to learn is what you're supposed to do, according to the Greek gods or whatever. But Meg's already been through this stuff. So yeah, like you said, she's super jaded. I also think I don't know if this is weird to say, but I think she's one of the hottest Disney characters that was ever created.
Yeah. I would agree. Meg's fine.
So yeah, and I just really like her as a character too, because like we don't get a lot of, like you said, fleshed out love interests in Disney movies. Like, they don't have their own necessarily personality other than like they're in danger or playing hard to get for some reason.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
she has agency.
Yeah, she really does. And, you brought up how that she's already hero and she makes that heroic sacrifice. And then we see that come back at the end, right? It's not Hercules the one, at least, I mean, he does later, but he's not the one who's like making that heroic sacrifice. She makes the heroic sacrifice by saving him She literally, when he's depowered, saves his life, pushes him out of the way of that like crumbling, rock or the column, and then by her dying, that's what's able to break, the deal and let Hercules go and save the day. And then you have, that sequence where Hercules goes and like fights the gods and saves everybody. But that's almost like not even the emotional climax of the movie. It's the big action beat, that we've all been waiting for. And that part is interesting, but I feel like, I don't know if it's because of this movie or since then, but like I feel like a lot of those beats are like a little cliched almost, where I feel like there's a lot of, whenever it's Greek stuff, it's always about the planets aligning or like the Titans getting out. I've seen so many fucking movies about like releasing Titans, like going back to like the Clash of the Titans.
Yeah.
And it even shows up in that Henry Cavill Immortals movie. But then, that's all just great action Disney, fighting shit. But then the real climax of the movie is Meg descending into the underworld, and Hades, after he's lost, being like, all right, well, I've got this thing. I've got your love of your life is, I've got my revenge on you, He's almost like Merchant of Venice. Like, he's like, I'll get you. I'll make you bleed, And and Meg is descending in the underworld, and then Hercules, he has his heroic sacrifice to save her, and then it kind of pulls her up. And that, to me, is the real climax of the movie, when Hercules, he had become a hero before that by going and saving everybody. Or no, that's when he becomes a hero. Sorry. That's when he goes and like really becomes a hero. Not when he's going and fighting the Titans and saving the world and doing all this heroic stuff. It's when he's sacrificing himself, when he is putting his own life on the line for someone that he truly loves and pulling her out. And then he chooses, in a really great moment, he gives up his dream of, going and living with his dad in the clouds to have a mortal life with Meg. And that moment really hit me this time, when he's just like, I'm gonna have mortal, and she's kind of like walking away. She's like, oh, I understand it, but she just gives him this look back, like she's just like so happy, she's just like, she was not exactly surprised, but she's so, relieved and excited to be able to spend her life with him.
Yeah, I think that's really an impactful moment too. I mean, like I said earlier, one of the cool things about this film is it's a literal hero's journey, but also he is discovering kind of his place, like where he feels like he belongs. And, he was stolen as a kid from Mount Olympus, turned mortal, so he couldn't go back up, raised by these older people. But while he's like growing up and we see him as like an 18-year-old or something, like he doesn't fit in at all. And like, he's trying so hard. And so now he's like, okay, I must not be long here. This isn't where I'm supposed to be. And so then he goes on, discovers Zeus is his father, figures out, oh, if I can prove to my dad I'm a hero and maybe be mortal again, I'll just go back home. And then in that process is learning about all these other joys and loves that he's finding in his life. And I think that's really important. I don't want to be cliche and be like, it's like a grass is always greener situation. But when you're going through all this stuff, like if you look at it at face value and look at all the things, all the labors that Hercules had to do, like what was the goal of all those labors for him? What was the purpose within this film? And for it to be, you're actually fine where you are as long as you find the right people, I think is like a really good, in the best way, cheesy, like this makes sense to me and I absolutely love it. And that's what I got from it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I feel like there's a really interesting arc that he goes on where, like you said, at the beginning, he starts when he's like, I guess probably like 14 or something. He's this scrawny kid played by Josh Keaton. And he's, before he gets trained by Phil, he's just kind of this klutz who like gets picked on and everyone kind of hates. And then, he starts becoming this hero. And, the same kind of people who would, harass him and pick on him are now loving him. And he's like, cool, like this is everything I wanted. I must now be a hero because people love me. But, you kind of realize he realizes that's not what's important. It's not important to be like loved by the masses and to be a hero for the sake of being a hero. It's much more important to have someone who actually loves you and sees who you are as a person. And the love story in this, we've talked about how they're both so much more fleshed out characters than a lot of other movies. And I think their love story itself is a lot more fleshed out and realized than most other Disney movies, like I can't really think of any other Disney movies that, you know, at least from this era or previous eras, that have such a good love story. It's a lot more like, oh, we're singing in the woods and then we fall in love, or you kidnap my dad and like I slowly realize you're a cool guy, you know.
Yeah.
Or like I heard you know, I saw you once, so I gave it my voice. Like, you know, things that are like maybe not the greatest through a 2025 lens. And you look at this one, it's like, no, these people really have a great love story. And it's funny because it kind of starts out like Hercules saves her, and he thinks like, oh, you know, I've just saved you. You know, you should like, you must like me or whatever. And she's just like, kind of like, all right, Wonder Boy. Like she's just kind of like, fuck off, dude. You know, I'm not interested in that. I don't need saving. That's where most, you know, Disney love stories would start. But that's not where it happens. It really starts when she starts to get to know the real Hercules after she's like, all right, I distracted your fangirls, you know, let's kind of like slip out the back and have a nice moment. You know, I guess maybe Aladdin is the only thing I can think of that's close in terms of a love story that is really this emotionally resonant and satisfying. I don't know. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that, I mean, it's a 97-minute movie, and when you're having a Disney Renaissance movie, like a romantic subplot is baked in at some point, and so you have to figure out how much am I willing, what's my suspension of disbelief on how little time these characters need to spend together in order to fall in love. And it's like, okay, I'm accepting that at the end they're going to fall in love, but you look at like the events that happen between them, and I think, you know, I don't want to say like trauma bonding, but there's like a significant amount of things that happen with them that get them to become closer together, other than one saves the other. Like it's not a one for one, like you were mentioning. Like there's an ongoing relationship, and also like she's keeping a massive secret from him. So there's this tension that we as the audience know about, but Hercules doesn't. And so we're trying to figure out, how is this going to end? And I think having that kind of complexity is really helpful when you're basically trying to make another Disney princess movie, but it's not really that. It's just you're trying a different twist on the formula.
Yeah, I agree. And we've talked a lot about Hercules and Meg. What do you think about the rest of the characters in this movie? You know, you've got Hades, who I think is I kind of compared him to the genie a little bit. I think he's really interesting. Obviously, you've got his kind of like minions. You know, one is
Pain
played.
and Panic.
Yes, Pain and Panic. One Bobcat Goldwave.
Oh my gosh, that
incredible,
voice.
Right? You've got Rip Torn as Zeus, and then of course, you know, you've got Danny DeVito as Phil, which is, you know, a great reinterpretation of the satyr, kind of like, you know, trading the hero. What did you think of the whole supporting cast in this?
I think the cast is absolutely wonderful. I mean, like my favorite, Hades might be my favorite villain. I mean, James Woods went off the deep end a while ago, but this character,
loony, but yeah.
This character is so good. Like I can't stop watching. I laugh at everything he says because he's so smooth. He's so fast talking. He's like Hades. When did Hades become like a salesman? Like it's so. It's so fascinating to see this interpretation, because like you could come in there and be like a Thanos or something, but no. Hades is just, he's this slick talking, conniving guy who's just trying to make it to the top. And I think that the way he's animated, the voice acting behind it, because he can go from up to down, 0 to 100 in a minute, just with something will trigger him. Something Pain and Panic failed to do will just like trigger him. And I think he's absolutely great. I love Hades in this film. And then like Danny DeVito is Danny DeVito. Like he's amazing. He's so funny in everything he does. And having the character of Phil, I think it's really interesting, the character of Phil, because like it's the character of the tired old expert, you know, trainer, whatever. We've seen it in tons of movies. Like we've seen it in tons of sports movies. We've seen it in Star Wars. Like we have all these characters that we've seen this character before, but making it a satyr and having Danny DeVito voice it and being so grumpy and cartoonishly animated, I think is a really fun twist. If I have to put my kid lens on, I think it's really fun to see this, because if I'm unaware I've seen this trope before, it feels fresh to me because of the way that Danny DeVito kind of embodies this character.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Are your business expenses playing hide and seek? With Uber for Business, the small spends that slip through the cracks, like rides and meals, go right where you need them. Because it integrates with leading expense platforms, you can say goodbye to surprise costs, missing dollars, or chasing receipts. Everything's track downable. Uber for Business. Make small steps that make a big impact. Learn more at uber.com/small steps.
Yeah, I think he's great. You know, both of those characters were ones that really, as a kid, stuck out in my memory. You know, like I loved Hades. You know, like I would say's my hair out like all the time. You know, I love I like you talked about the design. I think it's such a great design. Like, how do you make Hades like fresh and interesting? You give him this kind of like fiery hair, and you make him like this blue fire, and he's like, hey, this cool slick talking guy. You know,
Yeah.
I think he's so good at that. And then, you know, you have those moments where he kind of like flips off the handle and he loses his cool and he becomes this red fire, and his whole like his back and everything is all just lit up and his eyes are all wide. And then Phil is incredible. Like, you can't see anybody other than Danny DeVito, to the point where I think like that's just Danny DeVito, right? Like that's just Danny DeVito if he had goat legs. To the point where I think that, because I know they're doing it in live action, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Danny DeVito is just playing this part again. I
did hear that. I didn't know if that was like a wish list casting, but I did see that, and I was like, I mean, I'm interested, but I'm still not gonna watch it.
yeah. I mean, we could circle back to the live action remake, but like he's so good, and it's interesting. Not too long ago, I read Song of Achilles, and it's funny because like I'm reading that, and it's like Achilles is getting trained, and it's like, oh yeah, okay, like he's getting trained by a satyr, and I was like, yep, okay, Hercules, like he talked about this, he talked about training Achilles, which this is because they mess up the, like we said, this is not accurate. They mess up the Greek timelines. Obviously, Hercules was alive way before the Trojan War. You know, that's kind of like the end of the heroic cycle. But I was like, okay, cool, I know where this is at, and yeah, DeVito just like absolutely kills it, and even Pegasus the horse has, even though it's just like, you know, an animal just making animal sounds, like it has such personality, and even down to like the tiny bit, like Wayne Knight's in this movie, you know, like he's doing his thing, and you know, it's pretty fucking great. You know, Paul Schaefer as Hermes, he's just being Paul Schaefer.
That's when they made him look like Paul Schaefer, I was like, this is great. Like, even as a kid, I knew who Paul Schaefer was. I was like, that's so cool. Like, that's the guy on Letterman. Like, that's and Blues Brothers and all this other stuff. And I was like, that's so cool. Like, it's so funny. I think it's got to be a cool opportunity for an animator when you get to animate someone, get to animate a character modeled after an actual person in physicality. Like, they gave Hermes the little glasses. Like, it's literally him playing him. Yeah, that's so fun. He's playing the keyboard in the end too, which I think is a cool little nod as well.
So good. Yeah. One of my favorite just little throwaway bits from the whole movie is when he's like, Zeus, everyone's captured. I'm captured. Then Pain and Panic grabbed him and started flying. But yeah, man. So to bring it back, because we brought it up, I guess now we got to talk about it. The live action remake. You know, how are you feeling about this? Because, you know, I'm usually not a fan of these Disney live action remakes, you know, so I usually, you know, will catch them on Disney Plus or something later on. I'm a little bit more like, what's going to happen with this one? I'm a little more optimistic than I would normally be. I think part of that's because Hercules is, rather than just being like a Disney movie, it's such a long-lasting cultural thing, and I think there's a little you could do with it. And the second thing is it's Guy Ritchie is doing it, and of all the live action Disney remakes, I think one of the better ones is his version of Aladdin, and I really like him as a filmmaker. You know, you said you're not going to see it, but so, you know, I don't blame you at all for that, because I'm
still curious. I'm still curious because
I'm curious. Yeah, what are your thoughts on it?
I mean, it's frustrating to kind of think about as someone who just like loves the originals of all these so much, and I don't want to put myself in a box of like I'm resistant to change. Nothing should change because that's stupid. Don't think that way. But I just haven't liked the approach of what I've seen so far in the live action remakes. From a semantic standpoint, some of these are actually not live action. They're made to look realistic as opposed to actually be with the Lion King and Jungle Book and stuff like that. And full disclosure, I think the only full live action remake I've seen is Mulan, and I can't tell you anything about it. I don't remember it. That's kind of like it went in and out. But I did happen to see the scene in the live action remake of Lion King. I saw the Hakuna Matata scene, and I was just so sad because if you look at the original Hakuna Matata scene, it's so full of joy. It's like the animals are smiling because animals don't smile in real life. Like like they're supposed to be anthropomorphic in a way, especially with their facial expressions. And when you take a photorealistic approach to it, you lose that magic. Like it just looks like an actual animal singing, and it's weird because animals don't sing. Like I need the artistic interpretation, for me at least, to have to bring together that grandeur, that magic, because like people don't sing their feelings in real life. Like it's a musical, so lean into that artistry, that magic, that creativity, that theater. Like lean into that. That's what I want to see. And as far as Guy Ritchie taking over, like I'm a Guy Ritchie fan as well, especially those older stuff. Like I could rewatch Snatch right now and quote the entire thing. That's one of my favorite movies to rewatch. And I don't know, if someone says, hey, I really want you to go see Hercules live action remake with me, I'll be like, okay, I'll go with you because you asked me. But I don't know. But I think having Danny DeVito reprise his role, I'm curious to see how they would do it, whether it's just like they mocap him and put his face on a thing. Like I don't really know what that would look like.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see, and it's interesting because I feel like it's there's certain roles that I'm like, you just can't, like we said, I don't think anyone else can do this. Obviously, it's insane they're already doing a live action Moana, but like it's like, yeah, you got to have The Rock as is that,
That's The Rock trying to make all the money he can in the world, man. I'm not gonna fault him for that. Everybody's got to make their money, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, the other one that I think of is, it's interesting because there's actually two movies based on Dean DuBois animated films that are getting live action remakes this summer. One is a Disney one without his involvement, Lilo and Stitch, and one with his involvement is the DreamWorks one, which is like now DreamWorks is trying to get into that Disney live action remake game, which is How to Train Your Dragon, which admittedly looks a lot better. And I think one of the things I like about it is that they are keeping Gerard Butler in the role of, the father in that movie, which I'm like, yeah, nobody else could really be that role. Like in the same way that DeVito has to be this. But yeah, I find that the live action remakes are pretty, to be very generous, mixed bag. I didn't see the Snow White one. I've seen a handful of them. I think they're most interesting when they, and it's weird because I just said I like the How to Train Your Dragon one that looks like a beat for beat remake, but I think they're most interesting when they're not just that, right? When they do something different.
That's what I want. Yeah, that's do something different. Don't make it a musical.
Right.
Cast somebody else. Like just do something.
Like, and this is before like the live action Disney remake thing started, but it's technically the first one. Did you ever see like the 94 Jungle Book?
Yes.
Yeah, I really like that movie. I liked it quite a bit. I want to see more stuff like that. That I think is really interesting. Or, I mentioned Aladdin's probably one of my favorite ones. The one that I like a little, that I actually really enjoy, and this movie got a hard time, I think undeservedly, was the David Lowery Peter Pan movie. Because that movie, calling it a live action Disney remake is not even really accurate. It's, it's not even called Peter, it's called Peter Pan and Wendy. It kind of got dropped on Disney Plus really unceremoniously as we were coming out of lockdown. And it does some weird, interesting new stuff. It's not my favorite Lowery movie by a country mile, but it's not at all a live-action Disney remake. It's very much a different story with these characters.
Hmm.
And so if you did something that's like, hey, just like that one, inspired by Hercules, and you have the same characters and stuff show up, but it's not beat for beat a remake, I would be much more interested in that. And obviously, we don't know what's going to happen, but that's my hope for this movie.
Yeah, I think there's it's kind of tough because when you do these remakes, okay, what's the purpose? What's the goal?
Right.
Yeah, it's a studio, it's money. If you from an artistic standpoint, like what are you looking to do? Like what can this version be? What can it add to? Because it's all IP, and IP has this kind of legacy. So in the land of legacy, like what can be added to it? So we talk about like Jungle Book franchise, like you were saying, like the OG animated one. Okay, great, cool. Then you have this live action one, which is an actual live action one and not a photorealistic generated computer photorealistic generated version. And I think that's cool. That's a different approach. There's no singing because animals don't sing. So like, let's have that there. And I'm also thinking of, I mean, at the time we're recording this, the second season premiere of The Last of Us came out. And there are visual things in that TV show adaptation of the video game that if you played the game, go, oh, cool, they did the shot. But if you hadn't seen that, you would not know that you would not have that kind of like Easter egg, but you would still appreciate it because it's a cool shot. Like they're not doing it to force a reference. They're not doing it to force a thing we are used to. They're doing it because it looks good. And so if just scratch the term kind of live action, if someone takes one film and wants to adapt it into something different, whether it's live action to animated to live action, graphic novel to TV show, video game to podcast, like whatever. If you want to do that, approach it from a different angle, from a different perspective, think outside of the box. Don't just take the same film and change how it looks. I think that's kind of like a disservice, because the reason something can be animated is because like you lend yourself to more, like your imagination can run wild because you can just draw whatever we're not able to like put together and see. You can exaggerate facial expressions. You can have things that are weird, like singing. And the same goes with any kind of like magical realism piece of whatever. But so that's the reason why you would do something animated. If you want something live action, you should make it feel real. You should not make it feel like a literal fantasy. Like Lord of the Rings is, yes, that's a fantasy story, but it feels real because it's a live action thing. Like that's why. And so when we're thinking about Hercules, I don't know what they're going to do. I don't remember who all they've cast and if it's actually ironclad or whatever. But if I did it and I had to make it live action, it'd be no singing, which would be awful because like I really miss those songs. That's so cool. So like, what do you do? I think you just make it really dramatic. Like it almost can't be fun. I mean, for me, it can't be goofy. It can't be over the top. Unless you're leaning in like a Mel Brooks route, which like you can't, because that's not what this is. It doesn't feel right for this. And so I think you just have to like make it serious, but I feel like Disney would be afraid to make it too serious. Yeah.
And because it is like, why are you doing this? Why are you making this? Are you just like updating it for like a new generation? You're just remaking now that you have tools that we didn't in the 90s. Now we can make a lion look photorealistic and talk. Is that the only reason is it for Jungle Book? The only reason, or the main reason that movie gets made, is because Disney gets wind that Andy Serkis is making a Jungle Book movie for Netflix, which by the way is phenomenal. I love the Andy Serkis one, but like
I need to check that out.
That it's really good.
Okay,
but like that's pretty much the reason they make that Jungle Book movie. And yeah, so it's like, if obviously, you know, from a financial perspective, like that's why they're making these. But yeah, what is the point creatively? And if you can find someone like a David Lowery, like hopefully a Guy Ritchie, that is like, okay, I want to say something with this IP. David Lowery hits on in Peter Pan and Wendy, the Peter Pan's like, I don't want to grow up, which is such a core thing about Peter Pan, and how that negatively just impacts those around him, which is, I think, the core emotional beat of his film. And it's not just like, hey, we're just, because there's been, much like, Hercules, there have been a million Peter Pans. There's a Peter Pan like every 5 years, it feels like, ever since Hook came out. There's been another live action Peter Pan. And like I was saying before, there's been a million Hercules, going back to Ray Harryhausen and all that shit. There's all this stuff. And it's like, okay, you got to do something to both differentiate it from that and to differentiate it from the one that you've already made. So why are you making it? And I hope that Ritchie, because he is a filmmaker that I respect, that I think has some interesting stuff to say, he did. I don't, like I said, I gave faint praise to Aladdin. That movie did some interesting things. I don't think it went far enough. I hope he is able to get off his chain a little bit more with this one.
Did it? I hadn't seen the Aladdin one. Did it feel like a Guy Ritchie movie?
That's the thing. It did not. It felt like the least Guy. And I remember like seeing it, and then right after it came out, like another Guy Ritchie movie came out, and I was like, oh, all the Guy Ritchie stuff that he wasn't allowed to do in Aladdin, like now came out in his next movie. I can't remember if it was like which one it was exactly. It was like the Cary Elwes was in it, I'm sure. But The Covenant, I think is what it was. No, The Gentleman. Okay. That was it. The Gentleman was the one. The Gentleman.
After. Okay.
Yeah, because they both come out in 2019, and I was like, it felt like he bifurcated. He was like, okay, this is my one for them, and this is my one for me. Like really going for that. So who knows what'll happen with this one?
Now that you say that, this might be completely off the wall. And I talked about a Hercules, a new version of Hercules that is all live action. That would have to be serious. Honestly, I think it'd be super fucking weird and cool if Guy Ritchie took like a lock, stock, and two smoking barrels approach to Hercules. Like, what if it's dark but playful? Because that the story that is presented in this version that we've seen, the 1997 animated version, it's a dark version. Like, if you think about this from the story perspective, like a baby gets kidnapped and almost murdered, and then has to like not know his biological parents for almost 18 years. And then he has to fight all these like crazy ass monsters and live up to hero worship. And then he's dealing with like the Lord of the Underworld. Like, this is some really dark stuff, but it's animated, there's music, there's gags, there's all kinds of fun stuff. So like, what if you took a lock, stock, and two smoking barrels and / snatch approach to this story? What would that look like? Give me all like the whip pan sound effects and like the block text. Like, I would see that, just be like, this is fucking weird. I'm just going to see what it's like, as opposed to, okay, the trailer comes out. This looks like the thing that Disney's been trying to do for the last 10 years, is like, hey, it's the thing you already know. It just looks different. Like, I don't want that. Give me something new.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair. And I will say too, like, the stuff in the Aladdin remake that wasn't in the original is some of my favorite stuff, It feels bad to say because, it's the one white guy, but I think Billy Magnussen is really fucking great in it. Like, he's just kind of this
funny actor.
He's
a
so
funny-ass actor.
He's just this absolute doofus that shows up in the movie, and you're kind of like, you can kind of suck, but I also think you're kind of great. He's so fucking good in it. So, I mean, I think that Guy Ritchie could sprinkle his magic dust on it. And unlike Aladdin, which, we talked about, you can't replace DeVito, I feel like you kind of can't replace Williams. No, and Will Smith really tried, but you couldn't do it. Whereas you're getting DeVito in this, and you can replace Hades. You really, like, you can. Hades is an interesting, iconic, he's like almost like an old curmudgeonly, like, New York Jewish uncle or something, like this kind of character. You can still have him be over the top without doing like the James Woods thing. You can still have that character be something else in a way that you couldn't with the genie. So I think there's a lot more opportunity with this one than some of the other Disney movies.
Yeah, sorry, I'm Googling what the cast is, because I want to see if it's actually true, or I think it's all rumors.
Yeah, I don't think there's really been anything solid other than Ritchie.
Yeah, but hear me out. I don't know why he came to my mind. I think a great Hades would be James Marsden.
Oh, okay.
He is doing some really clever stuff recently in film and TV, and some of the stuff he's been doing has been giving off like this vibe, but he really thinks very highly of himself, but is very quick to have his comeuppance come up against him. Like, and I honestly think it'd be really cool if he came in and took it like in a not your Jewish uncle fast talking salesman way, but was kind of like smooth. I think he could do it. I think I could see him doing it.
I could see. I really like that he's pivoted from being like the guy who's like the romantic rival who gets his girlfriend stolen in every movie to now he's just like this kind of like goofball, you know, like who's just like who like him in Jury Duty as himself, phenomenal.
So
like,
great, so great.
yeah. But yeah, like dude, we talked a lot about the live action one. Let's pivot back to the reason we're here. You know, the 1997. I was gonna say classic, but I don't know if that it's reached that point yet. That's why we're here talking about unrated. But it should be, yeah. Do you have anything else you wanted to hit on with Hercules 97?
I think this is something I observed, and I had to like double check when the gag came up. So when I can't remember if it's Pain or Panic is wearing like the Air Hercs, and Hades looks down and goes, "What are those?" And I go, "Is that the OG of this joke?" Is that? And then I was doing all the research, and yes, this is where that line came from.
Wow.
And so in the world of Disney, in the world of Marvel, in the world of Black Panther, the characters of Black Panther have seen Hercules because that joke is in Black Panther. And I'm like, what in the world is going on here? So I thought that was just really strange, but funny. And just the whole idea of like, we talked about like Hercules, him trying to be a hero, figuring out what that is. It's both overt and kind of understated if you're not looking into it, of this idea of like, does hero worship make a hero? And because you've got Hercules, like once he gets in the groove and starts doing hero shit and killing monsters and saving babies and all this stuff, like the merchandising comes in and it gets kind of wild. And it reminds me of the Watchmen comic, which like really criticizes just like superhero culture, and within that comic showing like, you know, these heroes are now like paid to do these extravagant rescue feats and stuff like that, and then they're like paid for public appearances, which they make that reference in Hercules. He's paid for public appearances, right? And I think it's
hero
really,
fees or something they say.
Yeah, like you're not really paying attention to that. But on this time, I was like, I never really pay attention to that. It makes this little kind of jab at who we put on pedestals. I think it's kind of interesting to look at. Granted, it's not that deep, but it's something they do include enough for us to kind of notice and see that it is a part of his journey, because he's doing all this and still not feeling fulfilled because he hasn't reached what others. It's a lot of others perspectives about like what a hero is, and then he finally figures out what it is. I mean, Zeus could have told him. But no, that's not how the gods work. They're not going to tell you anything. Right. You got to figure it out, and then they'll be like, "Ha! Now you figured it out." No, great.
The new McCrispy Strip is here. Dip approved by ketchup, tangy barbecue, honey mustard, Sprite, McFlurry, Big Mac sauce, double dipped in buffalo and ranch, more ranch, and creamy chili McCrispy Strip Dip. Now at McDonald's. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
But yeah, I think that was the last thing I was touching on. Other than, I wanted to talk one more thing about the art and the animation styles. And one thing I absolutely love is this kind of repurposing of the swirls and ionic columns on body parts in this movie. It's so fascinating to me. Like they draw people's chins that way. It's like every elbow and knee looks like that. And I was like, I think more recently when I rewatched it, I was like, why do they draw it like that? It looks like it fits. Why is that? My brain is knowing why, but it's not sending the signal to my mouth to voice it. And so then I was like researching, like, what is this art style? What is it? And I'm like, oh, it's just Cretan art. That's why it fits, is it takes all this art from centuries, from millennia ago, and puts it into these animated characters, like on the characters themselves, and not just like in the background kind of thing. And I think that's a really interesting way to try and develop a little bit more depth with your characters to make them feel like they belong, like they're drawn like they belong in that space, as opposed to drawing kind of your standard Disney character, or like I've seen those videos where it's basically a reused animation, but they just draw a different figure on it.
Yeah.
And this is it's just something new and fresh.
Yeah, and I really appreciate it. Like kind of touched on before, that's one of the things I love, especially about this time period of Disney, is that they really highlight, the cultures visually by making their own animation style look like that. And that's something I think that unfortunately we miss a little bit with a lot of the computer animated Disney output today, is that it all kind of looks like the same. It's all kind of emulating Pixar. And I'm glad that now we're, with stuff like Into the Spider-Verse, we're finally getting, and like we're the Millers or whatever that movie was, like stuff that is visually different.
The Mitchells versus the Machine.
Thank you. That's Mitchell's versus the Machine. Stuff that is still computer animated, but is visually distinct. Even Soul. Now Pixar is like going away from that Pixar style. But you talking about like the swirls in it. I remember like being a kid having, like, I had like a Hercules and a Meg action figure or toy or whatever. And I remember just like the swirl on Meg's hair being like, this is so interesting. Like, especially seeing it in like a 3D like that. But it's, like in the movie, it's like 2D, and it's very, very reminiscent of that old art style that you would see on all these, like, you look at like a drawing from like Pompeii or something, and you're like, that looks like it could fit right in.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just trying to think, if I'm not an animator, and so like I wouldn't know what the process would be like. The thought process would be like, okay, how do we make these characters look more like they fit in the ancient Greek world? And it's like, oh, let's draw swirls in their hair. Let's draw swirls on their chins and joints. I was like, never would have thought of that, but it fits so well. Like, it doesn't even look like, it both looks like there's extra effort and nonchalance. Like that's how you know it's good.
Yeah, because it's one of those things that if you don't really notice it, you don't notice it, but when you do, wow, that's incredible.
I love finding stuff like, I love those kind of facts. You're like, what? That's awesome.
Well, my last question before I get you out of here is of all the Disney animated canon, is this your favorite? And if it's not, what is your favorite?
That's a really tough question. I think it depends on what year you ask me. I think Hercules is definitely up there in the upper echelon for many reasons, a lot of which we've talked about here. I will say though that I haven't watched it in a very, very long time, but the last time I watched it was probably the 20th time in a row I watched it was The Lion King. Like, The Lion King was like my Disney movie growing up. Like, as a kid, that was the one I wanted to watch over and over and over again. And like in elementary school, we attempted a Lion King musical, and I was like singing and all this other stuff. And so I think I think of those two, it kind of like bounces back and forth, but there isn't one that I dislike other than Pocahontas. I dislike Pocahontas, but every other one, I feel like you ask me in incremental years, it'll change. But I think Hercules just needs a lot more respect on its name.
Yeah, that's fair. There's so many amazing ones. Obviously I love The Lion King too. From the Renaissance, I think definitely my favorite would have to be Mulan. That's a movie that I will go back to time and time again. Like, it's so love that movie. But on another day, Tangled might be. I think Tangled is so good.
Tangled's fun. Yeah, I like Tangled.
And then, if you want to go back to the old ones, I'd say maybe like Alice in Wonderland. I love Alice in Wonderland. It's so different than especially the stuff they were making back then, which I was very disappointed with the live action version of that from the
Tim Burton one.
Yeah, that's the one that started this whole thing. But
really?
Yeah, that was the first live action Disney remake that really like that kind of kicked off because it made like $1 billion. And,
it did?
Yeah.
Wow.
And then they were like, well, this prints money, so let's just keep doing more of these.
We had one success, so let's keep doing 15 of them, and hopefully we'll hit it again.
Yep. But yeah, so I say those three are. I mean, there's so many great, even like smaller ones like Great Mouse Detective and stuff, are ones that I love. But yeah, those are my favorite three for sure.
That's awesome. I had when I was really little, I rewatched Rescuers Down Under over and over again.
Nice.
Yeah, I was a big fan of that one.
Did you have the clamshells? Those like Disney like ones that would come in like the big white VHS that were like, it's like, you got to get this in the Disney vault before it's gone.
Oh yeah, the vault thing. No, actually,
Okay.
I don't think we ever got them because like, I don't think we bought them when they were out of the vaults, and like, I like whatever. Yeah, maybe I had the Lion King, but we didn't have a lot of those. Like any VHSs we had were in the cardboard sleeve. We never had it in the freaking plastic Disney vault kind of case. Oh, I forgot about that.
Right? Like I was over at my parents' house not too long ago, and they got rid of it made me really sad because they got rid of like all the VHSs that we had, which was a bummer. Except they kept the clamshells, like the Disney clamshells, and I was like,
only
all
those,
right.
just in case they go back into the vault.
I think it was just like a nostalgic thing, like, which, by the way, the Disney Vault was some insanely brilliant marketing from Disney, creating that artificial scarcity. And like, you could really go on like a whole dive onto like Disney, like not even wanting to release stuff on VHS at all, because they wanted to just keep them just re-releasing them in theaters, and their whole history of like media and all the way up to Disney Plus is very fascinating. And there's some good video essays out there. But it's that's a whole other podcast.
I know. I think just some like honorable mentions, like the Tarzan has to be up there just for Phil Collins. Like I think that's just the only I watch it and I'm like, it's a fine movie, but it's Phil fucking Collins. Like that's why this movie's great. And then even newer ones that like not legacy ones, newer ones. Like I'm a big fan of Zootopia. I love Zootopia.
Zootopia's great. Yeah.
I was a big fan of that one when that came out. But yeah, there's like you got a whole nother episode on like underappreciated Disney songs. I feel like coming your way. Like that's another thing you got to tackle.
That could be a good one. Well, Taylor, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a complete blast. Before you go, where can people find you and your podcast on the internet?
Sure. You guys can find me probably on Instagram is best, Tay D Adams. And then you can find the podcast, the Film Nuts podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, as everyone says when they're promoting their podcast, as well as on YouTube. We pivoted toward more of a video-centric show a couple years ago, so that's a lot of fun. We're also on TikTok and Instagram at Film Nuts Podcast. Yeah, I think that's it. TaylorDAdams.com and FilmNutsPodcast.com if you want to visit websites about stuff, but that's pretty much it.
Nice. And yeah, for anybody who's listening, maybe first time or something, underratedmoviepodcast.com has the links to all of the stuff, including the Instagram, Underrated Movie Podcast, on all of the social media, Instagram, Blue Sky, all that good stuff. You can also go to patreon.com/underratedmoviepodcast, where I have a bunch of bonus stuff for anybody who wants to sign up for $1, $3, or $5, depending on what level you sign up at. I have a whole bonus podcast that I do once a month talking about films that were originally released in 2D and seeing how they hold up originally released in 3D and seeing how they hold up in 2D. And then I do another podcast with my buddy Damien called the Midnight Film Society, where he's the host and I'm the co-host. We just kind of talk about recently released movies and trends and whatnot. But yeah, check all that stuff out everywhere. I was recently on a panel at WonderCon, so you can check that out on my YouTube channel along with...
It's a great panel.
Thank you. I had a blast. A mutual friend of ours, Trisha Aran, was on that. Yeah, check that on the YouTube channel along with... You can audio versions of all this. If you want to, for some reason, listen to this on just YouTube and watch a still image, you can do that there too. And yeah, if you can give the show 5 stars, that really helps out quite a bit, however you're listening to this. But yeah, I'll see everybody next time. And Taylor, thank you for going the distance.
Thank you so much, Derek. It was a blast, man.